going to come back and look at that at the end. So.
And you can absolutely post anything that you want to put in the chat too.
Okay.
We have our live stream is setting up now.
Okay.
So
and if there's any, this will be recorded and this will be put on YouTube, I believe. So if there's anything you want added to the description of the YouTube video, you can let Brad know, and he should probably be able to put that in pretty easily.
Yeah, we'll put these up on Microsoft Stream.
Brad's been my partner in crime this whole week.
We've been through it.
Yeah. Brad and his pets, the cat and the dog too.
They're around here somewhere. All right, we're ready to roll whenever you all are.
Yeah, let me just get a couple minutes to wait for people to get on here.
Oh, I was able to give family a hug today.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been vaccinated and we were in the same proximity, and I was just like, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing how nice normal feels.
Yeah. Except I'm not sure. My brother-in-law is not used to being as affectionate as my siblings are. So he's kind of like, you sure we can't extend that pandemic a little further?
And all the introverts, they all lamented.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that every time I'm recovering from being sick or something. I'm just like, it is so nice to feel normal again. And that too, for just being in the classroom with the students again is going to feel great.
Yeah.
There's a whole other type of energy in the classroom, and you don't really get that online as much, but maybe you can provide some insights in your talk for how we could try to establish that. All right, Brad, what do you think? Ready to go?
We're ready.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth and final installment of the 2021 Faculty Symposium Series. My name is Dr. Jonathan Gore. I'm a professor of psychology at EKU and director of undergraduate research and creative endeavors. The purpose of this series is to showcase and highlight the research and best practices at EKU presented to the university community and beyond. Today's topic is 2020 Vision, what we learned and how we can improve. And the presenters will be Dr. Susan Skees-Herms, Dr. Stephen Shisley, and Jonathan Sikora. And all of you are from the Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy Department, am I correct?
Jonathan is not.
Okay.
He is invited to our offices all the time.
Oh, gotcha. So we'll host all questions in the chat function. Otherwise, we'll keep everyone muted just to let the presenters present. And with that, I give you our presenters.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. One of the things, we want to start out, so we know that the year 2020 was unforgettable in so many ways. The worldwide pandemic, the economic challenges, the division politically in our culture and our environments, and even the collective calls for social justice, they're all still very much a part of our lives, even 1 year later. So with this symposium, the focus is what have we learned during this fateful year of 2020 and how we can move forward using what we have learned. So we're going to introduce the topic that each of us have a different role to prepare a course to go online. But these roles are not isolated from each other. Each person works in tandem with each other. So we're going to look at faculty perspective. We're going to look at the information technologists that Jonathan brings, and we're going to be bringing the instructional designer perspective that Stephen is going to be bringing. And we're going to discuss the relationship building methods that work towards proactive opportunities. So instead of being just reactive problem solvers, we're really going to talk about strategies that help us recognize our distinct skills and the values for our partnerships. Now, in this session, we're going to focus on not just the top 15, but we're really going to be looking at what we've learned during 2020. So this approach will focus more on holistic methods, to kind of view and deliver online best practice content. So before I turn this over to Jonathan Sakura, who's going to get us started, I want to let you know about an activity we're going to guide you through near the end of our presentation. Stephen, would you mind showing our Google slide? Thank you. So so this activity is basically, while we're speaking, if any thought or tip comes to mind, we'd like you to try and just jot it down in this Google slide. And at the end, we're going to kind of pull these thoughts together during the pandemic, like a summary sheet. So the only other thing, and Jonathan, Jonathan Sakura, would you mind going over the objectives? So I think you all can see that the link has been posted to that Google document, and now I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Yeah, so we're going to talk about a few different things. First, like as Susan was discussing, we'll talk about the different perspectives involved because we had a very rapid switch from the face-to-face, our regular face-to-face instruction to online last year, which that decision happened during spring break. I was actually on vacation down in Florida at the time, and suddenly started getting calls and emails that it was looking like we were going to be going to all online, and got tasked with putting together a training plan for moving faculty with that 1 week of sort of extended spring break, that like grace period for that adjustment and stuff. So so one of the things we're going to talk about is what were some of the different perspectives going through that moment, and kind of how we approach that. We're also going to talk a little bit about some tips and practical strategies as far as how to best deliver your online course, but also at sort of like examining what level of online course design you're at, because that was one of the things that we realized pretty quickly, was that not everyone is in the same place as far as comfort with the tools, availability and access to even some of the tools, and so trying to figure out what do you have the time and the expertise to be able to do when faced with something like this. We're going to demonstrate a couple of excellent best practices through Susan's course that Stephen helped her out with, and some different techniques that they've got, and as well as the escalation steps for when there are problems. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of pulling back the curtain a little on some of the IT process, as problems are reported and as people need help, sort of how we deal with kind of bringing that support to you when you need it. Oh, and then as well some collaboration tools and what collaboration tools we'll be using. So, and we'll start off with my piece with the kind of IT perspective. So yeah, so first I want to talk a little bit about some of the different support options that you've got for IT here at EKU, which most of you are probably already familiar with, but in case you're not, so we've got several options. We've got our IT help site, so just it.eku.edu. We have a knowledge base of different support articles on there, as well as tools where you can submit a help ticket online, some training resources. It's a pretty good stop with a lot of good tools. Another site that we've got, well, not from IT in particular, but our eCampus department, they're in their Department of Instructional Design. They have a help site, and that's what the IDC is, the Instructional Design Center. Their help site has even more like tutorials, as well as a lot of training resources that they do that are geared less from a strictly technology perspective and more like a pedagogical kind of avenue. So looking at that, and that's where you'll get more into like the best practices of how to use some of these things. We have our IT service desk, which of course you can reach by calling 23000, or you can do, we do still have walk-ins, though they are on an appointment basis with COVID now. And we are staffed in the evening and and for some weekend hours, and that's sort of the first tier support. So students can be directed to call that. In fact, we encourage that if a student is having Blackboard issues, it's often better to have them call the service desk than to try to work through the troubleshooting with the instructor, because again, our service desk is a little better equipped for that. They've got software where they can remote into the student's computer and see what the student is seeing, and do troubleshooting on that side of things. And then of course, faculty and staff are welcome to use the service desk as well. We give out all the computers and everything and have all of that running. So if there's more extensive issues, often the service desk will do either a house call out to their office, and again, this is more pre-COVID, though that's still happening even throughout this. And to be clear, that house call is not like a true house call out, driving out to your house, but where they'll go to an office if they need to do troubleshooting, or often they'll schedule times for like one-on-one online meetings or calls, more these days to help out with there. As far as the Blackboard side of things, which of course has become a little more pressing, in the last year, the more difficult Blackboard cases will get escalated. So if you call in, the person who answered the phones isn't able to help, it may be a more complicated issue or something that they're not familiar with, they'll escalate up to the Blackboard administrators. And there's two of us, myself and Gene Kleppinger, and we'll take a look at sort of that next tier of problems. And some of those issues, aren't things that we can fix. There's glitches in Blackboard that happen. Any large software system is going to have that. They patch it reliably. We get patches every month, but we still sometimes run into issues where if the technology is just not working right, we can't go in and like recode it. So we end up escalating to the Blackboard company and getting help from them. And we've got good working relationships with Blackboard as far as that. So yeah, so once this started to happen, we started to, and then this is something that we've been aware of for a while, but we really wanted to focus on when when COVID first hit and we started going into that first lockdown, was that different departments and different like individual faculty members all have kind of different needs for technology support, and in particular Blackboard support. So we've got some departments where they've got entire programs that are all online through eCampus, or they just have a really robust set of online course offerings that they're doing on their own that aren't eCampus related. Because eCampus, so I guess I should step back for a second and explain. So eCampus is all programs that can be done entirely online without you ever having to set foot on campus. That's kind of the whole like goal and sort of thrust of the eCampus, sort of department and system. The eCampus courses account for about half of the online courses that happen at EKU. And eCampus has the instructional design staff as well as like advisors and retention people and everything like that, that kind of help support those programs. So the instructional designers will go in and actually will help you as a faculty member. They'll help you build your course and design it, and do a lot of the Blackboard kind of like the clicking and things, and then as well like the just the general like design philosophy and help you to organize it in a way that's going to be the best. So it's a pretty robust like set of support services that they provide. I can't say enough things about the IDC, though in my defense, like my wife is one of the instructional designers, so that makes it easier too at times. But for the other half of courses, they don't have quite that same level of support. So those online courses, sometimes, most of the time, it's instructors that have sought out teaching online. But sometimes we have some where it's an instructor who's been brought in and or just kind of inherited an online course that they weren't necessarily like looking to teach, and so that can cause some difficulties for the instructor and then for the students for that course as well. And that's where the IT support steps in a lot, is helping out with those courses that don't have the instructional designer help. And that did change with COVID. Like the IDC stepped forward a lot to help out what are called like Campus One courses, which are courses that are online but aren't part of the eCampus. eCampus is Campus 2, which is their banner code. So that's just kind of the shorthand that we use for that. So some departments have those eCampus programs. They've got a lot of working relationships with instructional designers. They've gone through. They've done a lot of that. There were other departments that do very very little on Blackboard, and they mostly just use it as either a document repository, maybe a grade book, maybe they just post announcements for when class is canceled. That's the only thing they ever use in Blackboard. And the same for individual instructors. You may have, we've got some like computer science professors who, have developed software for a living and are skilled programmers, down to professors whose lecturing strategy has always just been like a legal pad that they bring with them to the front of the class, and they just lecture off of their notes on their legal pad and maybe use like a Blackboard or something. So we've got really a wide spectrum of people, and so that's a thing that we started thinking about as soon as COVID hit, was that there wasn't going to be like a one size fits all approach that was just going to tackle everybody's needs. So that was part of what we had to look at, especially for the training side of things, because we had to spin up a pretty quick like training regimen with all courses moving online, because there's a good number of faculty that never intended to teach online, some of whom actively were actively opposed to teaching online and didn't want to. They didn't like technology. They never wanted to touch any of this stuff. And so we had to figure out like, what can we do to get them through this, this whole event with as little disruption as possible. And so that's where we started digging into our training. So if we go to our next slide here. So for COVID, I worked with Nadim Slipchevich, who's over in eCampus in the Instructional Design Center. He's their training expert. I don't recall his exact job title off the top of my head, but he's responsible for all the professional development that the IDC puts together. So he and I worked together, and we put together a training plan that basically broke down different training offerings on different tiers. And our idea was that we would have a tier 1 set of training that's just going to be like very basic, not really digging into like pedagogy or like proper online like learning strategies, but is more just like what we considered more like remote instruction. And that we had intended for your instructor who, maybe they're not very computer savvy. They don't want to teach. They didn't want to teach online, but they're having to because in the middle of the semester a pandemic has hit. And so they just want to use their same in-person teaching style and lecture and just move it online with a minimum of changes and interruption. And so for them, for those training sessions, what we focused on was things like synchronous communication tools. So like using Zoom or Collaborate, putting up like basic assignments where students can submit work, but not really getting into any of the like more advanced features or tools that the LMS has to offer. And LMS, in case you're not familiar with the term, is learning management system, and that's just what Blackboard is, just the LMS that we use. So that's just where all of our online courses happen. So our second tier, this we designed more for faculty who have maybe done a little bit of online instruction or use Blackboard regularly in their in-person course, and that want to do that. They're past that. They already understand how to use the basic tools and how to present a lecture online, and maybe they want to start tailoring their class and making some changes to make it more like user friendly to the students. So this is where we focus more on some like asynchronous tools, like using the discussion boards and things like that, and some more advanced tools in the system to go in and really do more of an online course delivery, where it's a little less like we're going to meet Tuesday and Wednesday at 9 a.m. and we're going to do our lecture, and then you're going to do your essay, your exams. This is ones where you can take advantage of the online, the like flexibility you get from an online class for a student, and digging into those tools and what we would use there. And then for our third tier, this was one more for people who are already really teaching online and like know the tools more. And this is more about these were more like pedagogy focused topics. So this is moving into like the true online learning that's kind of the eCampus gold standard, and kind of bringing more people into that. So that had more talks by instructional designers about like their specific like areas. So things like building effective videos, using some of these like third-party tools, such as like Flipgrid or VoiceThread, things like that, and then like really digging into like how can you use that to really improve the level of instruction that's happening in the class, because we realized that, you know, if all we offered was, you know, things at the first or third tier, like we're going to lose a lot of people that are looking to take these steps, but just don't have it there. So then as well, we also tried to kind of like reach people where they were. So we offered a variety of, we had a number of webinars happening. We had some in-person workshops right at the beginning, departmental trainings where, you know, a department could reach out and we would schedule somebody to come out to that department and deal like specifically with their questions and issues. Because, you know, maybe you've got a department that wants to use a particular tool that other departments aren't necessarily using. So we do a lot of those departmental trainings, and then one-on-one instruction as well, for if there's an instructor that really wants somebody to just like dig into their specific class with them. And those all have different pros and cons, but our main thing was we just wanted to offer a wide variety of ways you could get to the content based on what you're looking for, because everyone's looking for different things. So from things that were just like sort of standalone self-paced items, all the way up to, you know, like a one-on-one, like I'll come to your office and like sit down with you and look through your course. So that was kind of our approach moving into COVID, and mostly we felt like it worked pretty well. We weathered that better than several other schools that I heard from. I'm on some regular calls with other Blackboard administrators from other schools. We had a few things going for us in terms of advantages. One was that a few years ago, when we did the whole LMS review where we were deciding whether to stay with Blackboard or go with Canvas, when we did stay with Blackboard, we went onto their SaaS system. And SaaS is just software as a service. It means we're using their cloud-hosted version of Blackboard. And the advantage there is that's all hosted on Amazon Web Services. So it used to be Blackboard was hosted on there was like a box in the Perkins building that ran Blackboard. And that wasn't, we couldn't scale very well with that. So, you know, it had enough resources to like handle our typical load, but with COVID, you know, we more than quadrupled our use of the Blackboard system for like daily concurrent users and things like that. I don't know that it would have held up very well if we were still self-hosting on just like a computer in the Perkins building. With the cloud-hosted version, you know, it's all on Amazon Web Services, so it'll automatically spool up new servers as needed as the demand increases. And I think that was crucial to us not having sudden Blackboard outages during that first week of like all virtual instruction and things like that. So we did have some advantages going into it. That I know I'd heard a few horror stories from schools that didn't have those, and it was definitely challenging. So, and yeah, we can go ahead and go to the next, Stephen. So, oh, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, thank you everyone for having us here, and I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas with you today. You know, the year 2020 was truly unforgettable in many ways. And I think we have learned a lot about course design and course delivery during the pandemic. And I had the opportunity as a member of the IDC, or the Instructional Design Center, as an instructional designer, to observe faculty as they had to quickly prepare their courses to go online at EKU. And I also had the opportunity to observe educators at other institutions who also faced a similar challenge. I also had the opportunity to observe the challenges that faculty encountered as they delivered their courses online. And so what I'm going to do right now is review what we learned from this experience of the pandemic and some of the practical strategies that may help faculty achieve successful course design and delivery as we move forward. Educators encounter challenges when they move their face-to-face lessons to an online learning environment. And they experienced a lot of challenges during the year 2020. Educators asked, where do I begin? How do I set things up? How many assessments and learning activities are too much when this course is taught online? And you know, these are questions a lot of educators asked. I know of a few faculty who successfully moved courses online by using what is called a course map. So what is a course map, and why did some faculty choose to use one when moving their courses online? Simply put, a course map illustrates how each critical course component aligns with one another. Let me show you an example of a course map. This is an example of a course map. Here you can see a table. under week 1. Notice in this table, it shows learning objectives. I have stated weekly objectives. I have one column for weekly objectives, another column for course objectives. These are the stated learning objectives in the course. And the table allows us to see how those objectives align with assessments, activities, and instructional materials. In this particular table, I've also included a column, the second to last column, on the community of inquiry. We use the community of inquiry in the Instructional Design Center as we teach faculty how to teach online. And it specifically focuses on active learning. We try to teach the faculty how to always keep in mind in their lesson plans how there should be learner interaction, learner content interaction, and learner instructor interaction. Creating a course map helped faculty cover relevant course content, which in turn helped the students achieve the desired results. And creating a course map also helped the faculty identify potential areas of instruction that required more attention. Many educators throughout the world discovered several challenges associated with technology and learning during the pandemic. Is there a way to remedy technology problems? One way, one single way? Probably not. But one thing that we learned that we can potentially anticipate and avoid some problems. The pandemic reinforced some really good practices in regard to course technology that I would like to emphasize. First, I strongly suggest introducing students to the technology they will encounter in the beginning of the course. It is a good practice to provide the students video tutorials about how to use technology. You can go step by step from downloading, installing, accessing to using the technology in a video, actually demonstrating how the technology works. I created an example that I would like to share with you about how to use technology in a course. This particular example focuses on Flipgrid and how Flipgrid can be used to give presentations in a course. We don't have the time today to watch the individual videos, but hopefully this will demonstrate how such a video tutorial can be created. Notice I have different steps: how to access Flipgrid, giving a presentation in Flipgrid, how to submit the presentation in Flipgrid, how to comment on a post in Flipgrid, as well as a demonstration video that demonstrates every single step for those students. I also recommend that giving the students the opportunity to experiment with the technology is essential. For example, if a course requires the students to give a presentation in Flipgrid, then provide them a practice Flipgrid. This practice area in the course is a fail-safe environment where they can experiment with the technology before actually participating in the activity. I've also observed that it is very easy as an educator to become overwhelmed with teaching online. Sometimes the educator focuses so much of their attention on preparing lessons and the technology that they forget to have regular contact with the students. Sometimes I wonder if all those students who disliked online learning during the pandemic, it was a result, or potentially what had a contributing factor to that was overwhelmed educators. The pandemic has reminded us of the importance of regular contact with students. For example, one effective method I have witnessed as an educator is an educator who kept a record of their interaction with students. They had an Excel sheet. They had each student listed and the dates when they were contacted. And this allowed them to make sure that no one was forgotten. This educator has provided us an example moving forward. I suggest that each week an educator should contact 5 students. Send these students an email. The email may be as simple as, "Hi, I was just thinking of you. I hope you're doing well. Do you need any assistance?" A simple email like this one may go a long ways in creating a personal relationship with the student. One of the biggest problems in online learning is the instructor who has gone missing in action. I suspect this may have happened in institutions throughout the world during the year 2020, perhaps more than once. Avoid this mistake at all costs moving forward. Here's a tip and practical strategy that I have observed as an instructional designer assigned to provide assistance to the occupational therapy department at EKU. The instructors in the occupational therapy department create a strong presence in their courses through weekly videos. You will make a difference in the learning experience of the students if you are positive and enthusiastic in these videos. Remind the students of the bigger picture as well in these videos, namely why the material covered in each week is so important and applicable in the real world. I follow many online groups on Facebook and other social media, many blogs. And during the pandemic, these online groups became flooded with educators who were seeking help and advice. Many of these educators discovered that their institutions did not provide them the services required to ensure that the online learning experience of their students was successful. One of the most common problems that I observed is the educator who noticed a lack of student engagement. Simply put, the students quickly became bored. They lost enthusiasm for the subject. What else can I do besides having the student read a chapter and complete a quiz, said one educator in an online group. Another educator commented that their students have become bored with reading the textbook and completing worksheets or writing papers. In short, these online groups vividly demonstrated that teaching strategies for face-to-face courses do not always work very well in an online course. Moving forward, it is a good practice to create variety in the course. Use a variety of assessments, learning activities, and instructional materials. This is how we can keep the course interesting. Some educators discovered that their email inbox became a nightmare in the year 2020. Again, this is something that I commonly saw in those online groups. One professor outside of EKU commented that, I quote, "I woke up each morning to hundreds of emails. Confused students. I dreaded checking my email each morning, and throughout the day, the emails never stopped." Here's one remedy for this sort of problem. Several online courses at EKU use what we call a virtual office. The virtual office is a discussion board where students can ask and answer questions about the course. The use of a virtual office should decrease the amount of emails you receive as an instructor. You will answer the questions only once instead of several times. Perhaps the students may even help answer the questions. During the year 2020, instructors and students found the daily routine of logging into the learning management system, checking emails, reviewing course materials, completing assessments as repetitive. The repetition of these events created what I and others call online learning fatigue. I witnessed both K through 12 and college professors and students feel online learning fatigue during the pandemic. My own nieces and nephews, who range between 9 and 15 years old, they live in California. I like to contact them each week and speak with them. We oftentimes have FaceTime conversations. And I tried to reach out to them during the pandemic each week. And one of my nieces commented, "I am so tired of online learning." I think many people could probably relate to that. The pandemic has taught us again and again that an instructor should always seek to make the course interesting, and they need to show that they are passionate about the subject. During the year 2020, some students felt that the quick transformation of courses to an online learning environment resulted in confusion about course expectations. Some students did not fully understand what they were required to do each week. I observed some educators who really tried to be transparent about course expectations. These educators clearly explain course requirements, grading criteria, and the policies. And being as transparent as possible greatly alleviated the student anxiety and stress. During the pandemic, many educators had to quickly learn how to teach online. A critical component of online teaching is providing students timely, constructive, and meaningful feedback. Many educators quickly learned that students need more than just a learning management system telling them if they got a problem right or wrong in a quiz. The students who had the most positive learning experience in the year 2020 received timely, constructive, meaningful feedback from their instructors. Providing feedback is more than just an opportunity to tell the students what they did wrong. Providing feedback is a learning experience for the students, a learning opportunity. Now, moving forward, so far I've talked about what we have learned about course design during the pandemic, and there's so many things we have learned. I just tried to find a few that I thought would be the most meaningful to everybody today. But so far I've only spoken about course design, and now I want to just kind of mention course delivery. I admit there's a lot to talk about in regard to course delivery, much more time than I have time today to cover. Therefore, I would like to take just an opportunity to share an interesting resource available to our instructors at Eastern Kentucky University who teach eCampus courses. In an effort to help instructors in their course delivery, the Instructional Design Center and the Office of eCampus created a guide for faculty. As we move forward, perhaps this guide could easily help the instructor who's not familiar with their responsibilities of teaching online. Dr. Steve Dwinells, the director of the Instructional Design Center, spent a lot of time thinking about the biggest challenges instructors experience when teaching online. Let me show you a checklist that he created. Dr. Dwinells meticulously crafted this checklist to guide instructors through the process of online teaching during an 8-week semester for eCampus. The main reason I want to share this checklist with you is because some educators during the year 2020, I think they were so overwhelmed with lesson planning and the problems with technology that they may have forgotten some of their duties and responsibilities. And creating a checklist of your own, or perhaps even using one like this one, may help serve as a reminder of all those expectations and responsibilities that you need to fulfill. This guide by Dr. Dwinells deserves recognition for its thoughtful organizations, its meaningful content. It is divided into several categories to help the faculty manage their online courses. As you can see, 2 weeks before, 3 days before, first week, daily, weekly, midterm, 2 weeks before, last day after the course is completed. Each category lists advice and tips with explanations about managing an online course. Reviewing every item is out of the scope of this presentation today. I invite you to review the items on your own time, and I will insert the link into the chat window. This is how the website works. As you can see, you can scroll up and down inside the website, and then you click on the little information icon, and a module window appears, and it provides you more information about that particular item. As you can see, some of these have a little bit more information. Post a welcome announcement. Dr. Dwinells wrote an example of an announcement that you might use as you welcome students to your course. I have received positive feedback from faculty who have used a checklist like this. They told me that it's very helpful, that they oftentimes refer to it, and that has provided them insight into all of their different duties and responsibilities. It's a helpful reminder. I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Susan Herms now, who's going to speak with us a little bit more about the faculty perspective.
Sorry, took me a moment to unmute. Thank you so much, Stephen and Jonathan. So one of the things I'm gonna, if you wanna go ahead and move forward, thank you so much, Stephen. So, one of the things you've just heard is that 2020 was definitely a unique year and really required us all to pivot as faculty, staff, and students. So you've also heard many of Jonathan and Stephen's input and their recommendations and how their departments have adjusted. But I want to repeat that all of us recognize the value of collaboration to support our own sanity and even to deliver the best educational experience for our students in this moment as well as in the future. Now, I was really fortunate that I had just completed EKU's basic course in Blackboard as well as the PD2 course just last year. And I'd already recognized that Jonathan and Stephen, I probably hadn't been here more than a month or two, that they were my survival partners for online success. I can't say that I know what their snacks are or their bribable foods, but they had already been partners that I knew were going to need to be helpful pre-pandemic and were particularly helpful during the pandemic. On a side note, I was actually in the process of pursuing a telepractice certification for more clinical presence with my own clinical healthcare expertise within the virtual context. And I had no idea that my 3-year research and scholarship that was related to OT's role in emergency response and disaster management would ever be so relevant. So one of the things I want to mention is, it seems simple, but it's a nice summary. At the time of COVID, we not only had the potential trauma, but the impact that a disaster status brings from a pandemic, that often ends up contributing to many drastic changes in our daily routines. And it forced us to use technology in a way we may not have been comfortable with, as well as we were mandated to isolate. So we know for many, this might not have been all that comfortable. And we were definitely not ready even in the fall when it moved into mid-semester, or even in the spring when we were still wondering, how long is this going to continue? Who knew that we'd still have this as we're moving forward with the ending of our spring semester? Unfortunately, we've had this unprecedented extension of the state of emergency status, and we've remained in what is typically called the disaster phase of response. And most of us are used to a moment of a disaster response, and not yet, we're much more skilled at the disaster recovery or the disaster mitigation phase. But there was not an opportunity to get a new normal or even hope that we would return to our best practice teaching tools. Everyone had to find a way to embrace and be operational with the online teaching strategies. So generally in higher ed, we tend to use andragogy to really guide our teaching. I'm going to make a comment, and many of you all may have noticed this. Some of our students, even though they may be, they're adults, but several, when we are under stress, some of us regress in our functional level. And I do think that for some of our students, we're seeing that pedagogy or more teacher-directed strategies became more demanded and were almost required for us to move our students through the course content. So sometimes even adult learners find it difficult to harness their highest level of functioning. I hate to ask this. So have any of you found that you're struggling more with your focus? Almost, I'd love to see you do a thumbs up, but that's probably not a good idea if your bosses are watching. So in occupational therapy, we have a term called self-regulation. It really just means that you've got that match of attention and energy and ability that can match the task that's at hand. And so that's where we don't have as much angst. And basically, we just have to have that best level of attention and thinking with our body and our mind being ready to learn and to be able to process the information that's being presented. So in times of stress, we all tend to go on autopilot. That fight, flight, or flee will jump in if we're too anxious. So some of our students really needed so much more help shifting away from that old pedagogical model. This pandemic has absolutely kept us in a disaster response stage and state, but we can be very proactive to thrive instead of just survive. So a few specific challenges I experienced as a faculty member were converting traditional face-to-face course to an online format. And this ranged from just getting the links and scanned materials from the previous face-to-face paper-based delivery to even redesigning these active learning formats that had been, tried and true for several cycles of delivering it. So unfortunately, this semester, the last several semesters, as we've had to shift to virtual with sometimes little time to evolve with best practice, we really learned each time how to improve this. So I was fortunate, again, to have access to both Jonathan as the EKU Campus Blackboard IT talent, and then Stephen as our EKU College of Health Sciences eCampus instructional designer. Stephen, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. Stephen has explained the community of inquiry and the quality matters pieces a little bit that are part of the eCampus approach. So as faculty, I had to take the content that I previously used, which is a basic topic outline that our department uses as a general course planner. So I'm just going to take a quick glance at the old form, and that's displayed on the slide. Now, Stephen, would you do me a favor and switch to the COI lesson plan page? So this is something that I did for myself. It's a thinking tool, but it was also based on what I learned in the PD2 course. So I took the content that we had previously listed and I added in the community of inquiry where you had content that was learner to learner, learner to materials, and learner to instructor. And I tried to make sure that either I could convert what was previously identified as our plan, how I could move that to incorporate all three of those pieces with each weekly module. And I really, as I moved this, I had to understand and verify that I could really include all three of these dimensions that are part of best practice in the community of inquiry framework. So by modifying that, it really helped me evolve a lesson plan. And Jonathan, Stephen, do you mind moving to the next slide? That's the OneNote illustration. Thank you. So we ended up having to use a lot of technology. And what we found was Stephen set up a OneNote where we were able to communicate directly and asynchronously. So with this cloud-based file, we could communicate in real time with updates. I could upload any of the pieces within that file folder, and it really helped us figure out what needed to be set up with the prompts, the sections, a clean format for a to-do list. So I suspect most of you already know about OneNote software through the Microsoft 365, but it really allowed me, as I'm actually relatively new to being a dedicated faculty. I've been a 35-year occupational therapy healthcare clinician, but I really adjuncted for about 5 years before I came to EKU. And again, as many of you know, not only EKU really invest in their faculty resources and development, the FICTL and the dedicated department resources, but I had not had as much prep as I'd had here at EKU, and I just savored it. I think the first year I ended up having 100 hours of continuing education between FICTL and the online learning content that the eCampus presented. So this really allowed me to share and apply a lot of the information to communicate the content of the course, share files and tips on some of the best practices in teaching. So with Stephen and I, we used this form and we planned weekly lessons and we did the assignments in this one location. It made sure that we were able to share these documents so they could be a one-click away. So I think I'm going to go ahead. So for my feedback to you all is just use the resources. We've got them here and they're pretty amazing. So I think I don't have a lot of other specific pieces, but I would like us to see if we can move to the tips and advice sheet right now. So does anybody have anything they would like to add or voice now that we're in this phase of our demonstration? Yeah. So I see that Dr. Upton, Dr. Renee Causey-Upton posted that it's really harder in the online environment to focus and sometimes managing your own personal factors around you. I know that Stephen could definitely identify with that because he's got a household that sometimes has very little people, to his parents visiting, who are working simultaneously. I think, Stephen, do you mind sharing the story of when the three of you all were working virtually?
Yeah, just a few months ago or a few weeks ago, around the holiday season, I had my both parents over. They were both working remotely from home, and we were all in the basement. I was in one room. My mother was in another room. My father was in another room, and Zoom meetings all the time in different rooms. We could hear each other's meetings. And then on top of that, I have a 4-year-old son and a newborn baby, and so every now and then to give my wife a couple of minutes of peace from her from going crazy taking care of all these little kids. One of them would come downstairs and play with me for a couple of minutes. And so it really, during the pandemic, you can really see the craziness involved was in the craziness that sometimes develops because of this remote working and this especially this online working for people in all sorts of fields, just not education, but also for corporate fields as well.
So you can kind of see we got started with some of the things you might have heard, but I'm going to ask you all, you're welcome to unmute, or you can type directly on the document. But some of the things we wanted to share with you all are just, we have so many places and resources that EKU set up to support us. And as we've all kind of found, there's a plethora from our own industries to our own practice areas of resources. Again, I kind of repeat, as a relatively new faculty, I felt so well supported with my colleagues' suggestions. As I mentioned, I feel very selfish, but I literally would not hesitate to reach out to Stephen or Jonathan with the slightest question, and they were always, within minutes sometimes, able to help me resolve that. So does anybody have any questions you want to ask any one of us as we're working on this real-time document that we'll share with you all?
And just a reminder, you may be muted if you're an attendee, so you can ask questions in the chat function, and I'll be happy to read them off for you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I hate to say this, I naively learned that when you're in the waiting room, you have no communication tools. So that's, these are other subtle things we're learning as Zoom has become this new tool that not only do grandparents know, students know, we as faculty are using, and we're also participants, but even sometimes there's subtle things. Like I said, I did not realize that when you're in the waiting room, I can give you a message, but you can't tell me anything. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and start reading from the top of this. And then you probably heard us say this, or this is my feedback to you. Take the course training we have here. Jonathan does some extraordinary Blackboard training, both from the basics to all kinds of tips through Fichtel's TLIs. And then with the online learning instruction courses, you can actually go through and do the PD2, which is a dedicated, I think it's a 40-hour course. Ned has just done a tremendous job with that. And again, that couldn't have been more wonderfully timed because I completed it right before COVID hit. And then we also have the potential, I know Ned's probably going to be hit up quite a bit for this, but he also has the PD3, which helps you work with your instructional designer for your college to just take it to that next level. For best practices faculty. Now, another comment I know that I heard was preparing students for how to, this was Stephen was mentioning this, prepare students for how to use technology in the first few weeks, if not the first week of class, so that you're really assuring their competency with synchronous and asynchronous demonstration to the instructor. I taught the freshman seminar in the fall. And again, one of the things I realized, we had to pivot to online, unfortunately, because we had too large a group to actually bring them onto campus. And I spent probably 4 or 5 weeks sending individual messages, like Stephen was saying, checking on, when we had asynchronous, I would break out and try and, let each of them show me their screen. So the level of support in the front end makes such a difference, so that the students are able to relax, and it's not about their connectivity or the technology skills. They can actually be that learner, that college learner that we're bringing them to Eastern for. And and Stephen or Jonathan, if you all would like to read any of these and expand on them.
I think there's a related question in the chat, what you're
Oh.
talking about. So I was going to just quickly jump in there. Jose asked, were there any trainings, workshops direct to students to help them navigate technology in the time of COVID? So, faculty.
Yeah. You know, Stephen can also address that, but I will say, because Stephen Chisley is the College of Health Science instructional designer, he had helped me with both some eCampus ones, and then I was able to have him import some of his tutorials into some of my other courses. I will tell you that the freshman experience team were wonderful in setting up a lot of content for the freshmen, the freshman orientation courses. But if either one of you all want to mention that, or if anybody else.
Yeah, that's a good point, Susan. One of the responsibilities that we have as instructional designers is we make sure that when we design those courses for eCampus, is that not only that the instructor is familiar with the technology and prepared to use it, but also the student. And so, you know, we provide video tutorials for explaining specific course-specific technology. Now, Jonathan, I believe that we did create some Blackboard learning aids for remote learning during the pandemic. Is that correct?
Yeah, there were some. So that's because Jose, that's an excellent question, and that's an area that I feel like we could have done a better job of during the COVID response. So as far as campus-wide initiatives, the student outreach was, I think, a little bit more sporadic. We didn't have anything specific from IT, because again, hosting a workshop on Blackboard for students has a lot of challenges. For one, we have more than 16,000 students, so that's a large audience to try to kind of bring in for that. But as well, it's very challenging because courses look very different in Blackboard depending on who's teaching them, what department they're in, things like that. So even for some very basic advice, like where do I go to take a test, that's not a question that I can answer in a kind of sort of global perspective in terms of the whole campus. So that's a challenge there. We did work with Travis Martin in first year programs on developing the remote learning resources page that's in every Blackboard site. I mean, he mostly put that together. I just helped out on a few things, getting it deployed and things, and tweaking some of the technology information. And I might be having a power outage, so you may lose me here in a moment.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say the thunderstorms rolling in around all of us here.
Yeah, my UPS just kicked off, so I don't know. So what was I? Oh yes, so Travis Martin's remote learning resources. That was one of our main outreach things. I know our the IT Geeks group did a little bit early on, but they kind of got shut down during the first because they're normally the IT Geeks is Lisa Moore's area in IT, and she has 20 or 30 student workers that do a lot of student support, and normally they're a major part of our tool, but once campus shut down and things, they weren't able to offer very many of their resources as easily. So we had some, but not as many as I think we could have, and it, hopefully we don't have to do this again. But if we do have it again, that's definitely going to be something that I'm going to try to work on doing a better job of.
And Jonathan, you bring up a good point, because I think another challenge that we really experienced was that the needs of students in specific departments was very specific to their circumstances. And one department might favor one piece of course technology, while another one favors another piece of course technology. And so that was kind of a big challenge, was figuring out, well, what is kind of a general instruction that we can provide these students. And I think that kind of was the result of that question, was the remote learning aids that we put in the Blackboard.
We have another question from Brad, who's been a huge help. All these symposia is, do you feel overall technological tolerance and familiarity has increased since the pandemic? As an IT person in the pre-pandemic times, suggesting new technology used to be like pulling teeth. Many were not willing or able to understand. Moving forward, do you think this opens doors to potentially improving services with different technologies and enhancements in the classroom?
I'm going to just answer that super quick in terms of this whole notion of telehealth, telepractice, it's a piece that has pushed all ages to be able to engage in non-traditional instruction from our K through 12. And then here on our level, on a college level, our students have had to be more resourceful. But I'm going to make one comment. I think your faculty are better users. I think many of your students, we've discovered that we can't assume because they play on their phones all the time that they have the girth of proficiency for online learning participation. That's my quick response. But I know that Stephen and Jonathan will have a lot more reflective comments.
Yeah, I think that a lot of faculty, sometimes there's a lot of resistance to using new technology when it comes to online learning or any kind of classroom experience. And a lot of that resistance has to do with the fact that it takes time to learn technology and to master technology and to feel comfortable with technology. Well, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of educators found themselves in a circumstance where they were forced to learn the technology in order to even deliver their course. And so once they actually had to put themselves in that situation where they were forced to learn that technology, I think people started to become a little bit more comfortable with it. And luckily, we've had a little bit more time than I think everybody anticipated with the pandemic to become more acquainted with technology and to become more familiar with it. So I think moving forward, I still see a little bit of resistance when it comes to trying something new, especially in terms of technology. But I think that a lot of faculty are going to start feeling more comfortable with trying something new eventually, and learning and gaining a little bit more confidence with their capability. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jonathan.
Not particularly. I do think in general, people are a little more comfortable with it, having had kind of getting forced into the deep end a little bit there. I do think that there are going to be some people for whom where this was more of a traumatic experience to them and might increase their hesitancy, but I think that's going to be a smaller proportion than people who are going to be more comfortable. So
related to, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Jonathan.
I was going to read just another question, but it is related to your point about phone use that Jason mentioned in the chat. I've not used the Blackboard app, but for some students, their smartphone was their only technology. So using the phone to access Blackboard, and ergonomically, that presents problems, but I gather the app was not very user-friendly. Has Blackboard enhanced their capabilities? I referred a couple students to loaner computers from EKU libraries. And then Trina responded to that and mentioned that there is some issues with doing this on mobile devices, which obviously students are going to prefer based on frequent use. So
yeah.
So the question would be: is the Blackboard app on mobile devices working on becoming more user-friendly, since that's probably a primary preference for doing that?
So the first answer that I'd give is I would definitely recommend you to check out the Blackboard app. You should absolutely, there's two apps that Blackboard has. There's a student app, which is the one that in particular I would recommend you checking out. And that one's only going to be for courses that you're a student in, but you can use your pretend student account to log into your course and see it through the lens of the Blackboard app. There's also an instructor app. The instructor app is less useful. The student app you can take an entire course exclusively on your phone using the student app. You can take tests, you can submit assignments, check your grades, discussion boards, use Collaborate, the whole gamut. It's all in there and all fully functional. Blackboard is constantly improving their apps. They have roadmap sessions every 6 months or so where they share with us improvements. So they are definitely improving sort of the ergonomics and user friendliness of it. The tricky thing with the app, and where people usually run into problems, is that it's not so much necessarily just the app itself, but the app does organize things because it's not a website. It's not a full desktop computer or a laptop computer. So things are laid out a little differently in the app, and certain course designs don't kind of play as nicely with the app as others. So that's where I would really recommend taking a look at your course in the app. And I'm not like trying to impugn your course design. I'm sure your course design's fine. I've actually seen some of your courses, Jason. They're pretty excellent. But there's certain it's worth looking at to see how is this going to be displayed to students, because you might need to tweak your instructions, and there might be some changes to like your layout and where you've got information that might help out with that as well. But as far as the second part of your question, Blackboard is definitely working on that, but it's software development is a long process. Improvements from Blackboard, these aren't things that we see in like weeks or months so much as it is over months and years. We get an update every month, but often for any kind of like big feature change, by the time we're providing feedback to them, which we do regularly, I'm on a weekly call with a number of, like, including the head of software design for Blackboard, things that we as the like client institutions bring forward. Their next year or two's roadmap is already like largely set in their development cycle. So it takes a long time it's a big ship. It takes a long time to turn and move that around. So.
Yeah, and Jonathan, just to kind of comment on something that you were saying, I think it's going to be really interesting moving forward because, just in the past few months, I've noticed that a lot of applications for mobile devices for education are getting updates. And I think a lot of the reason why they're getting these updates is because they're noticing students are using their phones and their mobile devices more for online learning, and instructors are using it more for course delivery. And so I suspect that, as Jonathan said, it does take a lot of time for especially a company like Blackboard to roll out some kind of a major update to make something more user-friendly. But it's going to be interesting moving forward because a lot of these companies are going to come to the recognition that they need to make their apps more user-friendly.
Yeah.
I have to.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to ask you both as technologists, because I have to tell you something. As faculty and a challenged eye gazer, one of my biggest concerns is when my students are viewing my content on a phone, I'm like, how can you see all those words and those articles? And so, coming back to one of the things Dr. Mason mentioned earlier is I still refer my students to loaner computers or go to the computer lab, because you can participate in a lot of synchronous classes and get a sense of what you have to upload. But I'm still not sure. And again, maybe this generation may be really savvy at getting their files out of Google. I typically have had to send some of my students to both Stephen and Jonathan when they can't upload correctly. And I'm not so sure that some of that is because they're trying to use this handheld device that really wasn't set up to be this girth of a learning platform. So that's my bias. So please jump in, because
I was going to say, I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, Susan. And I think that one thing that we kind of all learned together was that a mobile device is really good for some things, and some things it's not so good. If there's some kind of a video sharing application, a phone is excellent for that. You have and a lot of these students are used to doing things like that through social media on their phone. So some applications it's really good for, but perhaps other applications like viewing a lot of content, perhaps that's not the best use for a mobile device. I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, and then one other thing that I do want to bring up, as far as improvements and things that we can do moving forward, there is a sort of second. It's not an entire second system, but there's a second like piece to Blackboard that we have access to that we're still kind of piloting. So there's two course views. What most of our courses are using is what's called the original course view, and it's the Blackboard we're used to. There is a newer one that they've been rolling out, and that's really. There's some schools have started switching over to it. It's called the Ultra Course View, and it's laid out in a much more similar manner as the app is. Whereas the original Course View is very much designed for, you access it on a computer and a web browser and things. Using the app or using the Ultra Course View, it's laid out in a kind of a little bit more linear fashion. You don't go as deep into like, you can't build as many nested folders, things like that. It's got a few tools that it's kind of missing that the original course view doesn't have, but it's got some other tools that work a lot better. We've got a handful of English courses and a think a couple others in a couple other departments that are using it. Psychology did, a couple of psychology professors did a pilot right before the pandemic hit, actually, with it, with kind of mixed results, but it's come a long way as well. So that's something that'd be worth looking at potentially also as something that's more mobile friendly, because they've kind of like designed the app and this ultra course view kind of in concert as sort of like sort of companion pieces. So that could possibly help out also. So
I wanted to also comment, I've used the student view for the Blackboard on my Apple device and my iPad, and it's wonderful. But I do think one of the things that's so funny is it comes back to what was said. I don't know if it was Dr. Mason or Brad, but just that it's really kind of the right tool for the right moment that we have to use it. I do have to share Brad's comment, because I will say, we talk about things we've learned in this year. Brad was mentioning that he knew somebody that did an entire essay on his phone. I'm like, I would like to see how autocorrect changed some of that. I've had some really funny stories on that. And then the other comment about that, in one of this poor freshman will never get to live this down, but I had a freshman that joined with their phone for a synchronous session on a boat in a bikini. Now, that's really atypical. I mean, I'd love to be able to join a class from the Himalayas mountain climbing. But so we've got these wonderful opportunities that have presented us. I'm going to say this even comes back to disaster management. I know some students in our doctoral class that are in labor and that are trying to do their work because, they're used to this online. It's a little more than I keep telling them, take your time, do what you need to do in your own life. But there's a lot of different things that have presented themselves that are everything from our learning curve that you all just mentioned to the reality that for those that maybe need to be caregivers or because of economics have to relocate. One thought that came to me that we haven't talked about is sometimes the device is reflective of their marginalization. They may not have the economic resources. And for some of our students, they aren't even aware that there are alternatives. So I found everything from connectivity issues to students that are trying to work in other states, trying to come in and participate in the faith-to-faith. We have so many new factors that we're dealing with this online COVID moments of teaching. That doesn't stay along our track of our conversation. I'm sure we're probably going to have to close out our discussion, but this is just something we could talk about probably for hours.
I do have a question for our presenters today. And it's something that I've talked about with fellow faculty members in the psychology department is when we move from our in-person classes to online classes, a lot of students seem to suddenly feel like the demands were much stronger. And I wondered if just psychologically, what we're asking them to do when we're in an in-person classroom is come to our classroom, listen to the lecture, do a discussion, do an activity, and then go home and work on some stuff, work on the readings and work on some assignments or whatever. So there was classroom stuff, and then there was homework stuff. And when we switched to all online, it's almost like, from their perspective, everything was now homework. That was all homework now. And I'm not sure I blame them for that perspective. It seems like that overwhelming feeling almost stemmed from, now I have to do everything myself, even though it's the exact same stuff. So what are your thoughts about that in terms of just a theory of what's going on, this perspective, or if you have any anecdotal backup for that, or confirmation or disconfirmation of that idea?
I would like to first mention that we are in a disaster. We're in a state of emergency. And so just as if tornadoes had taken down your buildings, we are not functioning with the same routines and capacity. So, but we don't see it. It's an invisible impact. The other thing, I know you really did a wonderful job of describing it, is because there's this sense that, well, they're young, they're digitally savvy, they will pivot comfortably. And part of the issue is many of those students were multisensory learners. And so what they benefited from was not only seeing the facial expression, but they had colleagues that they could look over. They could check out notes. They would have conversations synchronously, heading to the bathroom, coming in, waiting. So many of these lived components that help students process were also removed. And I really like what you said, Jonathan. I'll leave this to Stephen and Jonathan's Cora to comment. But I think you're right. There was this sense that, well, now you're asking me to do so much more, because as educators, we were pretty much required to flip the classroom. And even though that's an evidence-based method, the students were not ready for it. They're like, don't give it all to me. Oh, no. That's why I like, when I started that sense, I really liked that Ned did a nice job with that illustration of what, even though pedagogy is a concept in education that always guides us, the truth is we still expect that we're teaching college students who are adults. But whenever a disaster happens, and that goes back to in healthcare, we know that when you have a crisis or an acute event that changes your ability to do those day-to-day routines, you revert, you regress. And so we've seen this in our students, is this ability to adapt has taken them so much longer, and it still is. They don't have a sense of time. They don't have a sense of urgency. And yeah, so I literally just yesterday had one-on-one meetings with my students, and some of them I had to say, would you do this level of work with all of your other faculty, or are you just doing it in this class? Because so I don't know if that's answering it, but I'd love to hear Stephen and Jonathan, or maybe any other faculty.
Yeah, I really just have like maybe two solutions to it that I would share. The first solution is we have to be as transparent as possible about the expectations that we have now. This course is going to be 100% online. This is the amount of time you are expected to participate in the course. This is what you will be doing at home. And having that transparency, I think, could remedy some of those feelings, because now they know exactly what to expect. The second solution that I would put forth is you have to strive as an instructor to create a sense of community in that online environment. And that can be accomplished in many different ways. But the typical online course years ago was log in, watch a video, read a text, take a quiz, and then that was about it. And now we've discovered that with advancements in technology and learning management systems like Blackboard and other external applications, such as I used an example in when I was speaking, such as Flipgrid, we have other capabilities such as video sharing. Now, video sharing is a unique idea, because now you get to see people's faces and you get to hear them speak. And something like that can help create a sense of community between learners and also the instructor. We discovered that a lot of our learners in eCampus are adult learners of an older population. And online learning does require a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of maturity. And I seem to wonder sometimes if some of the challenges we faced during the pandemic had to do with the population of the people who were learning online and the age groups, and they weren't fully prepared for that environment. But moving forward, I think that we've learned that creating that sense of community is essential to helping people feel comfortable in an online learning environment, and also being as transparent as possible about those expectations can greatly remedy that solution, provide a remedy.
Yeah, I would also suggest that it might be worth looking at some of the assessments and things that you're doing and seeing, are there some assessments that can be cut out and removed, and really taking a possibly more critical look on like how essential is every assessment in this course, is this work that's really like pushing, I don't know, the like learning objectives and things, or is this just work that I've assigned because I felt like, I need to have a quiz every week or things like that. And during the pandemic, a lot of students that we've seen have really struggled with keeping up on their coursework because there's everything else going on and the uncertainty, losing jobs, being forced out of the dorms back to a home situation that might be more crowded. There's a whole slew. Like, I mean, you could go on for hours on the number of challenges and stuff that folks were facing. And that's part of where, like, we haven't really been encouraging as much. There's some tools and stuff that we haven't like really heavily encouraged the use of. I'm thinking mostly in terms of the online test proctoring and things, because those things, while they're valuable tools and definitely have their place, there's a lot of problems with that that crop up. And it in some ways it makes things much simpler for a faculty member, because they can take, if you're used to, like, I've got a 100-question midterm exam that I give in class. Students have an hour and 45 minutes or whatever to do it. It's an easy way to think, like, okay, well, we'll just make that quiz online, or make that exam online, have them use like Respondus and use their webcam monitoring, but that adds a whole other level of stress on for students. I actually had one of my courses that I'm taking used Respondus last semester, and I've used it extensively. I did a bunch of the testing. I deployed the thing. Like, I mean, I'm very familiar with it, but even I found it to definitely add to the stress level for things like that. And so that's where it might be worth looking at, like, a different type of assessment that maybe not doing a multiple choice question and like losing, because as Stephen said, there's a lot of like building a community that's essential. And as soon as you introduce tools like that, those are tools that kind of break down a community, I think. That shows like a lack of trust in students. And sometimes it's essential. Again, like there's some cases where there's no good way around it. But for a lot of them, maybe switching to like a more project-oriented approach would be kind of my thought, or is there something, roll some assessments together, work on some things like that. And again, I'm not, I'm not an education expert or anything. I'm a technologist, but this is some those are comments that I've heard from a lot of different places and in other like conferences and from other schools and things, is that this might be more of a time for that kind of approach, and maybe paring back on the requirements slightly. I mean, not like, don't give everything up, obviously, but there's probably a good middle ground.
Yeah, I think it was particularly surprising, the response to the amount of workload when we were going from in-person to online, and suddenly it seemed like in person it was fine, and once it was online, it was all the same stuff. It suddenly felt like it was triple the work. But I think a lot of that's just time management, trying to figure out when I'm going to do this. And when we have in-person classes, a significant amount of time management is done for them.
Yeah, you have a time that's blocked off.
Right.
You've got 3 hours a week.
You have to say, you probably should block off time to work on this class rather than just trying to work as fast as you can. But I think another consideration I've noticed for students is, and I don't know how much, I don't have data to back this up, but just my feeling on it is, it seems that since many of our students work in addition to going to school, is that some of them picked up on more hours because they had this asynchronous class, and it's just like, I have my own way of doing this class now, so I'm just going to pick up more hours so I can get more income, and I can't blame them for that. But I think that really added to just this time management crisis of just like, oh my gosh, now I have to try to cram in, all this stuff for this class in this one block of time or this one day when I'm off from work. And so it's kind of like the things that we see with the students when they were in class with working and then coming in only Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever. I think that became even more so when we became asynchronous, and students saying, all right, how can I move all the time when I'm working on this class to like midnight to 2 a.m. and then I can pick up another shift or two during the week. So my heart goes out to them, because that's a heck of a workload and a lot to juggle.
You mentioned something that's so relevant, Jonathan. And part of that is as the perception that I'm going to work more so that I will not have the debt accrued or the burden on my family, or I'm going to augment my family's contribution that they can't make anymore because they got laid off. So many of these pieces, but I think the other thing is, I tell my students, this is not a correspondence course. We are still expecting you to do academic work that is commensurate with an active college student that is working with us to evolve thinking skills, knowledge, and reflection. And one of the things Dr. Kazi Upton posted was that there's been some data that suggests there are higher rates of cheating because of online test taking. And one of the things, this kind of comes back to, and again, I don't mean to be a Pollyanna, but between Stephen and Jonathan Sikora, part of what we have here at Eastern are resources, because Jonathan taught me real quick, how can you randomize that sucker? And if I'm going to make it, I've flipped it to an open book, because, if I'm expecting you not to immediately recall this, I'm going to let you open book it, but you only have a certain amount of time. And so there's a lot of methods that how we pivot so that we still are doing assessments that are, which again comes back to the comment of the more you can get education as a faculty on best practice in online learning, the more we can be adaptable in this moment where it's demanding virtual instruction. I will say this, I am hopeful. As I mentioned at the onset of this, I got to hug my sister and my brother-in-law. I am hopeful that we will see our students, and even if I'm masked, that I can figure out how to communicate with them in face-to-face methods, that we can have classes in the ravine, maybe we need a megaphone, but we're going to be able to move back into some of those methods that really highlight this jewel that is Eastern. We are the place where not only can you learn as a community, because Eastern's hallmark, even when I was an alumni and my brother-in-law was back at Eastern, is Eastern brings you to that small community feel. You become, you're not a number, you're a person, you have a presence, and your faculty know you. So I know we've got to close, which I'm going to let you, Dr. Gore, kind of do the summary, but I'm so excited because I think we just need to have, as faculty, we need to have more and more of these conversations. But I applaud Dr. Shisley, I applaud Jonathan Sikora and Jean for the resources that they're out there. We just don't always know. And even the Student Success Center, we don't always know they're out there because they come across our email in volume. As you were mentioning, we get such high volume of emails. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is on the one-stop shopping for faculty and students, but we do have best practice here. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have some excellent research articles we're all going to be submitting across the country, across the globe.
Yeah, thank you very much to our three presenters today. And this is a recorded session, so a lot of people who are watching this will not have access to the chat function and see what the conversation was there. But those of you watching this on video, you were seeing this Google document, and we will have that the resources that were presented in the chat in the description for this video in YouTube. So make sure you check that out. There are several listed by Stephen. And so those are resources, but just remember there are lots and lots of resources. So you want to seek those out at EKU, and especially if you are wanting to bump up your online teaching skills. So thank you very much. Thank you for having a great close to this year's Faculty Symposium series, and I look forward to more of these types of conversations. Thanks, everybody.